Right. About 10 o'clock. So, good morning everyone, and thank you very much for giving up your morning for this meeting. Are there any apologies for absence? Okay. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? No. Okay. I suggest that we sort of start off by introduction. Maybe I should start and then go around. My name is Caroline Cooper-Marbia, and I'm the chair of this committee. And I apologize, I wasn't here the last meeting, but I'm here now. Thank you.
Democratic Services for Merton.
Chairman by Cabinet Member for Adult Social Behaviour and the Environment.
Kath James, Interim Assistant Director for Public Protection.
Good morning. Next meeting is held with the Regulatory Services Partnership. Ed Shader, Housing and Pollution Services Manager.
Good morning, Chris Lee, Director of Environment and Regeneration at Merton Council.
What's part of the NRM team?
Lewis Bassett, coordinating the NRM project.
Martin Gold, Chair, Environment Committee of Richmond.
Parsons, Richmond Content, Regulatory Licensing.
Paula Walker, Wandsworth Council, Labour Speaker on Community Services and Ward Councillor for Queenstown, which has got 9,000.
Gavin Day, I'm down on the agenda as contaminated land.
David Pascarella, Quality Officer called RS.
Jason Andrews, Pollution Team Manager.
Elizabeth Hannah, part of the NRM.
I'll be Gordon looking after the Canada NRM project.
I appreciate equity, honestly.
Thank you very much. Okay. The next item will be the minutes of previous meeting. Are there any issues from there? No? I have one. I just want a clarification of in the minutes. There should have been a report to this committee from last meeting, so I was just wondering whether Nick had anything to tell us about it.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry for the sore throat. There we go. Yes, there was a report that was intended to come, which was around a number of fees for the RSP. Now that is partially in front of newspaper too, but not in its entirety. I think it was largely due to the enormity of the task. I'll express that when it goes from there.
Thank you. So the fourth item on the agenda will be the joint working approach to air quality across the Regulatory Services Partnership, and we will be taken by Jason.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, that's a bit loud. Is that better? Can you hear me? I'm having to multitask here because I've got to flip the other button on the laptop at the same time, so excuse me if I make a mess. I think it's really important that the Cabinet members meet some of our team. It's a team that's relatively new. I think most people here started in around June, some might be here a bit longer. So rather than just see my face as the face of air quality, I think it's good to see some of the team here. We also have 3 members of our team in the gallery at the back. We have Nicoletta, Maria, and an associate member, which is David Kennett from Wandsworth. When Nick asked me to draft up a paper about the tri-borough partnership, I put together a committee report to try and highlight how it works across the 3 boroughs. Are you getting feedback from this mic? Is that better? Yeah, sorry. Say if you can't hear me. And it's an interesting function in air quality across the boroughs because it's a shared concern across London at the moment. So what I've done is I've drafted a brief presentation that we'll go through, which takes out some of the headlines of the committee report, and then I'll open the floor up to questions. There's lots of good staff here that can answer questions in specialist areas, so hopefully we'll have an interesting conversation. So air quality, we all know it's a priority for the boroughs. All of the boroughs in the partnership have declared an air quality management area. We all have air quality action plans. Richmond have a new one that's out for consultation at the moment. We'll monitor air quality to a lesser or greater extent in each borough. Some boroughs have more automated monitoring stations, some have more diffusion tubes. It obviously is something that we've inherited from the services. We also submit an annual status report, and all of our reports are accepted this year. And we have similar activities in the borough, which we'll come on to. We have a number of projects that span across the boroughs, and we have some very borough-specific projects. This is the team. The team is split into two. It's not split, it's one team, but for ease of reference, we have the staff that are employed by the partnership, which are direct revenue staff. Not all funding comes from the partnership. As you can see, Mire is funded by the diesel levy from the parking account. At the bottom we have our grant funded staff. Now this is staff that we've managed to secure for external funding. And that funding is funding Section 106, grant funding from the Mayor, DEFRA, that sort of thing. So we've been, as you see, we've been quite successful in managing to secure some considerable funding for the service. But this is relatively new. Most of this came this year as part of the MRMN project. We also have 2 vacant posts. One is specifically for Richmond, that's LIP funded, and one is in 9 Elms to deal with the large-scale development. So this is what we do across the boroughs. It's the same in every borough. We provide air quality monitoring feedback, we discharge our legal responsibilities, we deliver borough initiatives. I won't read through them all. So basically there's lots of things that are very similar across all 3 boroughs, so they've come together. Interestingly, exhumations is something that we adopted. It was a service that was fragmented across the partnership, but we decided that we would take on that function, so that's quite an interesting one. Shared priorities, obviously all councils have to monitor and report, that's a legal responsibility. Anti-idling is a big issue across the partnership. Every council is saying the same thing, we need more signs, we need more anti-idling, and there's some interesting work going on around that. The impact of construction and demolition obviously is another significant impact and significant across the boroughs. We have one sort of with major development around 9 Mills, and we also have the new Water Lake development coming in Richmond, and in Merton we have large-scale regeneration of the local estates. Planning, we're planning consultation, and obviously planning is a very important part, and it's one of the areas that people do pick up on as part of our winning. Schools is a priority as well. All the councils are interested in protecting schools. There's been some interesting work going on across the 3 boroughs, and I'll come on to that a bit later. We all want our air quality action plans to be up to date and delivered, and obviously we're definitely meeting the agenda. So for individual boroughs, this is not an exhaustive list. Merton's air quality action plan alone has 70 measures in it, but I just tried to pull out some of the headlines from the plans. For Merton, it is to continue to implement the 2018 air quality action plan. We have a really strong link with our partners in parking. We're linking air quality into parking. There's been lots of initiatives around that, and I think Merton is probably one of the leading councils in London. We are reviewing our diesel levy that was implemented a couple of years ago, just to see the impact of that and what that looks like, and the impact on air quality. Obviously, anti-idling in the borough is an important initiative. Our local plan is out for consultation, and obviously putting air quality in the local plan is really important because it then enables us to negotiate better with developers and also sets a scene as well. Merton leading on the London-wide NRMN project, I'll come on to that right at the end. It's a really good piece of work. Merton have taken the decision to monitor air quality at all schools in the borough. It's quite a significant task. I think it's 77 schools. I had the pleasure of going around and changing all the tubes about a week ago. And that's a really interesting project. And some of the initial data that's come out of that is very interesting. It's not what we didn't expect, but it's a very good piece of work. We're looking at school safety zones. This is where you block traffic off at certain schools at certain times of the day. I think we've identified 3 schools for that project. And there's what's called a SNAP project, which is a partnership project with public health. This looks at more than just air quality. This looks at everything in the area, from the fast food shops to how people travel to and from school. It's an interesting pilot. In Richmond, a new air quality action plan is out for consultation. It's a very good piece of work. I think that Elizabeth helped on that, and it's going to be an online document. It's going to be updated online. It's going to be accessible. It's very, very interesting document. Richmond are scoping for a diesel levy, exploring clean air zones, particularly around Richmond Town Centre. Obviously, that's a large-scale piece of work that takes a long time to implement. Richmond want to enhance air quality monitoring. It's something that most boroughs want. So should we say the less expensive monitoring that shows the indications around the borough. I think we're test piloting one. We struck with those. That's really.
I just speak up, sorry. Where was it? Enhanced monitoring. Anti-idling was obviously a priority for Richmond, as it is for Merton and Wandsworth. We also have a project around internal air filtration in schools.
There you go, back again. We have, we're test piloting 2 air quality filters in a school in Richmond, simply because when we took some readings of particulates that are extremely high within the school, rather than outside the school. In fact, the particulates were massively high. It was an old building, the fabric of the building and the soft furnishings. So we're going to see what the impact of that is. We went before committee with Councillor England yesterday for the new planning policy guidance. This basically sets the story that we expect in the borough from development and regeneration and how that contributes to delivering cleaner air. A very, very good piece of work that we would like to consider in Merton, but until the local plan has been implemented, we can't do that. One of the first jobs that I did in Richmond was to update the local plan, which said you can support that with an SPD. And again, safety zones is something that Richmond are interested in. Wandsworth, there is an existing air quality action plan, and we're continuing to deliver that. That action plan is constantly changing. We are adding new initiatives to it. Richmond, Wandsworth have the 9 Elms development, which is huge. I think somebody said it was about £20 billion worth of development, and the impact of that is quite significant. And managing the impact on air quality is really important. I think there were some huge exceedances a couple of years ago, and I think there was needed special attention around that, and there was some resourcing put in there from the development themselves. Wandsworth have Tideway and the impact of Tideway, which includes noise and air quality, and that's a significant impact on the borough and locally. I think Council will probably understand that. There's a Clean Air Village project for Tooting, which is funded by DEFRA, and we have an opportunity to extend it to Wandsworth and Richmond. And I think we'll probably need to discuss that over the next few days. Schools audits, again, schools are a priority for Wandsworth, and we are committed to auditing schools and paying for green screens and funding measures if we find that school is a particular area, a problem area. Also, there is a project or competition for installing internal air filtration in schools. That's a really interesting piece of work, but I won't go into it too much. It's basically we're paying for filtration if the schools put up some money. And of course, Putney High Street, as you all know, Putney High Street was traditionally one of the most polluted areas in London, and Wandsworth have done some wonderful work there. I think David Kenning was responsible. Best practice. So, when I was looking at the boroughs, I was looking at what we do well in each borough. For Wandsworth, obviously, the work around Putney High Street was absolutely brilliant. It managed to reduce its exceedances around the town centre and lobbying TfL for cleaner buses. Obviously, we can't be complacent about that because the level's still exceeding Putney, and we need to make sure that we keep on top of that. The 9 Elms development, there's significant funding for 2 members of staff, and Maria's been leading on that across the development. So basically looking at housekeeping and how developers clean up after themselves. It's again, it's a really good piece of work. Obviously we've got the Clean Air Villages, and Wandsworth have theatre groups that go around schools and talk to children about idling and travelling to school. And it's a commitment that's ongoing. In Merton, we have our new air quality action plan, which was quite innovative. It sort of shook off the old boring matrix style of air quality action plan, and it sort of talked to people. Well, I hope it did. We have the diesel levy and parking charges, which I think we're leading on in London. We have schools activities, obviously. We have the NRMM project, which I'll come on to a bit later. We have citizen partnership. We have a forum with interested parties, which is just set up. We've had our first meeting, and it gives a chance for us to link into organisations that are interested in air quality. And in Richmond, we have a communication plan. We also have a dedicated committee to transport and air quality. And I don't know if I think that's exactly the only one in London. I'm not sure. Usually they're tagged on to other committees. I'm not really sure about that. We have a peer partner approach. So during the setup of the air quality action plan, we actually went to our partners and our critics, and we said what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right, and they helped influence the air quality action plan. We have the supplementary planning guidance, which will be up for public consultation very soon. And there's a strong ambition about moving the whole borough towards a different form of transport, so walking inside. We come on to our flagship project. This is the project funded by the Mayor of London and all London boroughs. So we have, we're delivering the world's first low emission zone for construction. It spans all London boroughs, and it basically officers go on site and remove the dirtiest equipment. So it's a significant impact in the supply chain. We're working in partnership with the construction industry. They are very interested in doing the right thing, and we're sort of feeding into that. And it's one of those projects that actually shows a real outcome, so we can actually gauge the level of emissions saved by the project. And I think it goes into hundreds of tons of NOx. So it's a really good project. It's one of the cornerstones of the Mayor's environmental strategy. And it's something that we'd like to share with other local authorities. As you can see from the logo up there, we've just branded that piece of work, so we're hoping to extend it. So I hope I haven't bored you too much. That's it in a nutshell. If there's any questions, we've got lots of people on the table that are willing to chip in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jason, for that presentation and for the report in general. I'll open it up if you have any questions to ask. Yeah, you first.
I want to start by saying thank you to Jason's team, who've been brilliant with their help and support with Tideway and the construction area at 9 Elms. I mean, really helpful. There's a number of questions that I have. First of all, it might not be your department, but I'm pleased to hear that Wandsworth Air Quality Action Plan is continually updating. But when you actually look at it, it's very hard to know because there's no dates about when it's last been updated. So it's only 2016 to 2021. I'm going to raise that with Wandsworth, but I'm just kind of keeping you in the loop because that's quite tricky. And the second thing that I'd like to raise, which I think you can answer, is about the number of tubes that we are using to monitor air quality across, the 3 boroughs, but Wandsworth in particular, because a colleague has told me that we've got about a third of tubes compared to Richmond. Is there some work around that? And I'll give you my third question, which is we have a Wandsworth Environment and Sustainability Strategy due to be published in November. So I'm hoping that the work that's doing is a result of us declaring a climate emergency can be referred to here.
I'll try to answer the questions in order. The Wandsworth Air Quality Action Plan is updated internally, and there is a matrix that is continually updating. Whether that's published, I'm not really sure about that. And there is the same concern in Merton about how we publish the updates on the action plan, because there's all this work that goes on in the background, and it's all good work. But
So don't really tell you.
You can share that first if you have.
I think the cabinet will probably be okay. The other question was around the tubes. Yes, the diffusion tubes vary across the boroughs. We inherited that as a service. In Richmond, there are, I think, 70 diffusion tubes. in Merton, we revised the diffusion tube network, which was very poor. We went from, I think, 20 to 50, so we redefined the entire area. In Wandsworth, that's a piece of work we'd like to do, but we can only do it at the end of the year because it's reported annually. We need to maintain some consistency in the tube data reporting. I think you have 22 diffusion tubes, but what Wandsworth does have is it has more automated monitoring stations than both of the other boroughs put together. So it's a sort of swings and roundabouts. So some of that automated monitoring is around 9 L's development and things like that. But the diffusion tube network, yeah, I think at the end of this year we'll review it like we did in Merton. But we also have to make sure we keep continuity. We can't ignore 10 years of data and then move on to different sites. We have to incorporate that. And the third question is, excuse my memory.
The West, the environment strategy.
Oh, yeah, I think all of this work is starting to tie together anyway. We're meeting with colleagues in sustainability, and you'll find that, as in Richmond, we're going out on joint consultation on some of this work. But yeah, I think it's all starting to link together. I'm not sure if that answers.
So the diffusion tubes, we have reviewed the diffusion tubes over many years, and we've changed the locations. So sometimes we've had locations where we've been meeting the air quality objectives, and therefore we've stopped monitoring there, we've monitored for 5 years, maybe more, changed the locations to a new location, and we think there may be exceedance, and that's how we've worked in Wandsworth.
Okay.
And actually, with regard to the Wandsworth quality action plan, it is published every year in the annual status report, so you can see really how it has changed since 2016, and the last update will be July 2019 actually.
I don't have it, but I'll talk
It will be uploaded on the website in this week.
Perhaps I can clarify on that. Every year we produce what's called an annual status report, which does include an update on the air quality action plan. It doesn't give you the month-by-month nuances of what's happening around, say, idling and things like that.
It gives you the headline figures, and that's due to be published. It was just signed off.
Oh yes, okay, that's fine. Thank you. Councillor Myers.
Just to add my thanks to Jason and his team, I think they do a fantastic job on all of this. 3 questions just in terms of some learning for Merton from the other boroughs. So on anti-idling, it looks like both Wandsworth and Richmond are slightly ahead of us in terms of enforcement and giving the enforcement officers some of those powers. And I just wondered what the results have been, because I know we're looking to roll that out shortly. Secondly, on clean air zones, you mentioned that Richmond's looking at that, and I know we've had some early discussions about Merton, and I just wondered if you could say something more about the process and what that would mean if it did come in. And thirdly, you mentioned Putney High Street, and I think it's a source of frustration in Merton that the buses aren't being cleaned up more quickly, particularly the number of routes that go through Wimbledon. And I just wondered whether there was any learning from the Wandsworth experience of lobbying TfL that we could look to in Merton.
Sorry, you have to excuse my memory, I should have brought pad and paper on that. So in terms of anti-idling, it is a priority in the boroughs. Wandsworth, I think, one of the first boroughs to authorise CEOs or have 2 CEOs to start the enforcement. And they've been doing it since, I think, 2017, and Nicoletta will probably put me right if I'm wrong. And they focus that work in certain areas or respond to where they can to complaints. In terms of fines, I think there's nominal. I think it's more of an educational program, and I don't know how many fines you've issued. Can you perhaps clarify?
I can confirm we haven't issued any fines.
No, and that's not uncommon.
No.
But I think what they do record is the intervention, so they consider that as the informal enforcement. And Richmond made a huge commitment to anti-idling and are exploring a number of options. And we did some training for the CEOs, so they're out there doing a piece of work, and they want to scale it up around borough-wide activities and borough-wide signage. Merton were behind the curve on this one by about a year, I think, and that's something that we're looking at the moment. We're hooking up with our partners in parking, and we're going to provide some training. We've had some interesting work carried out by councillors. I think councillors want to get involved in local schools, which adds some resources into us, which is a really good idea. And I think Maya's leading on that. We'll report back on that shortly. The signage in the borough, we are rolling out signage, but it's inadequate in some places. I admit that. It needs some of the signage needs to be bigger. It was put in wrong places. We're aware of that. So we're also successful in part of the joint London bid around anti-idling, so that gives us more resourcing. So there's a lot of activities going on, but we are on catch up, and I agree with that. The second question was the clean air zones. We made a firm commitment in our air quality action plan to consider a clean air zone, and we were initially looking at Wimbledon. We have secured some funding for the next few years from our LIP colleagues for this piece of work. It's not a very quick piece of work. We need to do a scoping report, and then it will be taken out for an area of that scale. It will take some time, and it's the same situation in Richmond. It's not a sort of quick fix, but it has to be an incremental process, and there's lots of things we have to comply with. But interestingly, we have an opportunity to apply for a clean air neighbourhood, which will be a precursor to some of that work. So I think we'll discuss that outside the room. But the funding that we have for the clean air zone is I think starts in 2020. But it is a piece of work that we're committed to, and I think it's an important piece of work. With regards to buses, I think everybody's saying the same thing. That it's too slow. Putney were in an unusual situation where their exceedances were horrendous, absolutely horrendous. We don't have those exceedances here, so they were on a really firm footing to lobby. And they did a piece of work which showed that the buses were one of the worst polluters, or probably responsible for most of the pollution. And then obviously they fed that back to TfL, and they listened. But they had to, because the exceedances were horrendous. But we don't have those here. We have exceedances, and it's wrong that we have exceedances, but they're not of the level that we can force TfL's hand. But we do keep lobbying. I hope that answers the question.
You? Any other question? Yes?
I think that's working. Just to say that, of course, the offence is refusing to turn off your engine when asked by an officer, so it's not everyone does turn it off, so it's not surprising there are any fines. I suppose the other point to make is, of course, when the cars aren't idling but moving around, they're still emitting carbon emissions and pollutants. So we mustn't lose sight of the objective to reduce the number of private motor cars on the road. It's rather like recycling, where recycling is fine, but it's even better not to produce the waste in the first place. So I think we've got to be quite careful that our message doesn't get focused too intently on anti-idling as if the whole world is saved if less people idling at level crossings. It's all part of a much wider picture.
Any other questions? When it comes to anti-idling, I think what you've just said, I think if anything, we need to also be educating the public so that they get away from that bad habit of just idling and causing pollution necessarily. If you're driving, I mean, it is pollution, but it is necessary because you're getting somewhere. So anyway, thank you very much, Jason.
It would be a really good idea if I could ask a question about our cabinet members. Obviously, it's very rare that I get to sit in front of them all, and I'd like some. Are we hitting the right notes in terms of priorities? Are we delivering what we're supposed to be delivering? I'd be interested to get some feedback from the council's directly.
Just as a matter of interest, I have to read that for us.
So can you just try?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
This is as a matter of interest for you. I was reading 2 or 3 days ago that in Richmond we're really lucky because in the middle of the Richmond Park and also Bushy Park we have a very clear air zone. So I mean, obviously immediately around the edge we're still a bit messy. whatever. But we do have two areas that everybody in the borough can walk into and be assured of being able to breathe clean air.
Well, I'm not a cabinet member, but I am Labour Speaker for the Environment in opposition. But I will say that we've done this huge listening exercise, and the number one complaint is air quality. And so I really welcome Jason's commitment to reviewing the tubes, because I think that personal experience of walking about and feeling, sort of dust on your skin and choking it, regardless of what the measurements are, it's noticeable. We also, we've mentioned the building works at 9 Elms, and we have residents who live around the cement works, and there never seems to be a green tax or anything for sort of unblocking drains or cement dust and the impacts of crack housing. So these are all things that clearly are probably slightly beyond your scope, but residents are complaining about it.
Interesting. Sorry, Jason. On page 17 of this appendix 1, the summary of the National Air Quality Standards and Objectives. Do you want one by time?
Yeah, just to confirm, the appendix 1 relates to our legal objectives. These form part of legislation in the UK. These are the levels that we should be adhering to. For nitrogen dioxide, that's ostensibly caused by burning. It's motor vehicles, boilers, that sort of thing. It only exists in the natural world through lightning strikes. Very strange, it's a man-made thing. We exceed along our main roads. We have, obviously our parks are safe havens, which is really good. I think most boroughs have those, but we still exceed along our main corridors. And I think that's the same with all the boroughs. The exceedance is different between the boroughs, but they still exceed. That's something that we need to obviously get to grip with. I think yesterday there was a commitment to an environment bill, which is good news. Obviously, if it comes through, we've been lobbying for that to give us stronger powers to deal with some of these local issues that Councillor Walker talks about. In terms of particulates, again, there's legal limits for particulates. Particulate monitoring is quite difficult. Particulates are actually part of the natural environment, but they're also blown over from other countries. So the particulates are either very local in terms of, let's say, construction or something like that, or they blow over from abroad. Some of the biggest exceedances we've seen are actually blown over from other countries. I think Saharan dust was one incident that we had. Fine particulates, so this is a real concern. These are really tiny particulates that get into your sort of tissues or the bloodstream, and we don't monitor enough on 2.5 particulates. There are very few monitors in London, and we have objectives for that. Sulfur dioxide, again, I think that's something that we let go of because we now comply. So we have these two types of local pollutants. We have particulates and we have nitrogen dioxide and NO2 that we have to make sure we comply with. There's a legal responsibility for that. And it's not something that we can do alone as a local authority. It has to be national, regional and local, which is what we're obviously lobbying government for. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. Right. So this was for us to note. No, so we'll move on because I think this is just for us to note the report, the information in there, isn't it? So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 5. So this is the discretionary fees and charges. Is it going to be Catherine or is it Nick?
Chair, before I introduce this paper, did you want to see if any of the officers from the air quality team wanted to be released is probably wrong word, but whether they wanted to excuse themselves?
If you, thank you very much for coming. And yes, I think you probably have further things that you will do continue being here. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Thank you for that.
So, half down, half to go. The paper you see in front of you was requested by the last Regulatory Services Committee. It's not what you asked for in its entirety, I have to confess, because that's when we started to evaluate the work required. We started to appreciate the enormity of the task. So the paper you see in front of you is in relation to discretionary fee setting. The Regulatory Services Partnership, as you know, delivers services for 3 authorities, and as part of our functions we undertake a series of licensing or permitting activities. Now, some of those can be classified as statutory set and others are discretionary. And sat between the 2 of those tiers there is the ones which are capped, so there's an upper limit that we can charge. So this paper relates solely to the discretionary fees or the fee structures. I don't intend to get into fee setting itself. We're purely talking about the structures for this particular report. When it comes to actually setting the fees, at some point in time they will come to the relevant committees. So the type of licensing activities we undertake extend from anything to do with the sale of alcohol or regulated entertainment, through gambling, betting shops, fruit machines, etc., animal welfare establishments such as riding establishments, pet shops, and so on, street trading, scrap metal dealers, tattooing, ear piercing, nail bars, beauty therapies, even really extraneous matters such as hypnotism and auction houses, houses of multiple occupation, and also authorised processes. So quite a lot of permitting processes are undertaken by the RSP. Of those that are discretionary, really it relates to things like the animal welfare establishments and the beauty establishments, what we call MSTs, so massage special therapies, and just tattooing and piercing. So that's really what this report relates to. Now, when some of this legislation was put in place, the independent licensing departments for each authority would consider how they would set those fee structures and how they would put them in place. And if you look at Appendix 2, that will show you some of the dissimilarities there are between the way that the fee structures are set up between the 3 authorities. Now, that's not to say that any of them are right or wrong, it's just to say they're different, and I would contest that's the same across all local authorities. The legislation comes into force, the licensing department in consultation with the relevant committee decide how they're going to set those fee structures, and away they go. And there is a large amount of dialogue between licensing authorities and licensing professionals, but generally what happens is these fee structures are set to suit the needs of individual authorities at that point in time. And then progressively over time they stay, and we just modify the fees according to the cost of administering the licence. And then in 2015 we had a Supreme Court judgment, and this is in relation to the European Services Directive or the Services Regulation of 2009. And the outcome of that judgment was that really what it did is it clarified the Services Directive insofar as it made sure that the fee setting was non-discriminatory, it was justified, it was proportionate, and it was clear. And those are the 2 key things. I think it's about the proportionality of the fee structure and also how clear it is for the customer. As a consequence of that, what we need to do with these fee structures is we need to break them down to 2 key parts. There is a Part A fee and a Part B fee. The Part A fee is for the administration for processing that licence application, and the Part B then encompasses the issuance of the licence and any enforcement or any other costs incurred by the authority as part of that licensing process. And there was further guidance, which there's a link appended to the back of the report, which was given by the Local Government Association, which helps us to determine what we can actually include within that fee. The next steps really for us as an RSP is to break down the fee structures that we have into manageable chunks. So what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at street trading as an example, because we cover street trading for 2 of the authorities, for Richmond and Merton, and we'll try and develop a fee structure amongst the officers that suits the needs of both authorities, but is also consistent. And then we're going to do the same with the animal welfare licensing, and with all of the discretionary fees. So what we end up with is a set of consistent fee structures across all three authorities that we can bring to the relevant committees for your approval. I would envisage that we should be able to complete that work by spring to summer 2020. It is quite a chunk of work because, as you can see from the appendices, we're talking about a large number of licences, and we're talking about some of the ways the structures are set up. They are distinctly different. As I say, it's a large piece of work. We'll break it down to manageable chunks. We'll issue it out to the officers, and then we'll come back, I think, to this committee initially. That's the wish of this committee, and then they'll go to the relevant licensing committees for further approval. And that's it. I'm just taking any questions you might have.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah, not at this stage. I'm not working very hard. So, sorry.
That might work then.
Well, what I had to say is quite short. I just wanted to say thank you for the work you're doing, because I know you're working very hard, and I'm looking forward to what comes out, because I know you'll have different ways of doing things. So thank you very much.
You wanted to ask questions, so yeah.
Thank you for the report. As a clinical hypnotherapist, I'm quite looking forward to seeing what the regulation is going to be. Last meeting, you may recall, we talked about the monitoring amount of time from application to granting licence, and I believe my memory serves me correctly that that's happening in Merton and Richmond, but not so much in Wandsworth. Are you able to say a bit more about that?
The time monitoring is difficult to do. The difficulty we have at the moment is we have 3 different case management systems. The way the systems are configured is entirely different. As a consequence, we can't consistently monitor the time it takes for different licence types across the 3 boroughs using those systems. We will be doing time promotion work with the officers so we can understand how long it takes them to do the initial administration of that licence. So that's from receipt of the application through to putting it onto the system, processing the payment, doing everything that we need to do behind the scenes. And then also we'll be trying to quantify how much officer time it takes to undertake the checks to validate that licence, to do the physical and check the property, all the premises of the business, and then also to issue the licence at the end. And then everything else that we're allowed to encompass within that fee setting, we will consider. So that's from community services through to the enforcement that the officers have to take to ensure that there's a fair and equal playing field for all business types. One of the pieces of work we're doing at the moment is we're looking at road traders, if you like, unlicensed premises, and we're trying to establish how many are out there, and then obviously making sure that they are compliant, so they can apply for the licence, so we actually take enforcement action against them. So that piece of work has started. The initial sort of desktop exercises have established that we feel there are some unlicensed traders out there, and we'll be focusing our attention on those over the next 6 months.
Thank you for your answer. The reason I'm asking this specifically is I know from colleagues that there have been complaints from people who have applied and there's been a long delay in Wandsworth. And I'm just wondering, while I don't want to take your work away from the road traders, if there could be in time a meeting of the 3 systems which might actually be more efficient than doing time and motion studies.
Yes, that's to answer that, Chair. We hope that the 3 systems will meet in a most wonderful way at the end of this calendar year. That's the current plan, and that will make it far, far easier for the officers because we'll be working on a single system. At the moment it is quite unwieldy for them to navigate 3 different systems, and obviously it's quite time consuming as well. So the work is in progress. We've been spending, again, an inordinate amount of time and effort trying to bring ourselves to the point where we can actually transfer the data from 2 systems and put them into a single entity.
Thank you. Could I? Oh, sorry, Councillor Barris.
Can I ask about HMOs? So I think part of the challenge we have in the East Borough particularly is not so much the licensing of HMOs, it's the fact that many are unlicensed and then they need to be investigated by the housing team to ascertain whether they are licensable, and that obviously has capacity implications. And there is a knock-on impact with HMOs, with presentation and lots of other things that are creating issues in particularly wards in the east. And I just wondered whether there was a way to sort of marry those two things together to look at the licensing of HMOs and how that then relates to the housing services team who have actually got to undertake the investigatory work to ascertain whether it's licensable in the first place.
I gave a right smile as soon as you asked that question, Councillor Byers, because it gives me the opportunity to pass you to
It's a slightly complex answer because in Merton Borough the licensing of HMOs is done by the housing department, not by the regulatory services department. But I can answer the question in principle because of course we do the same thing for Richmond. The licensing fee we've calculated is at about exactly 25 hours of officer time and allocated the relevant hourly rate to those 25 hours of commitment fee, which is going before the housing committees in Wandsworth and Richmond in a month or two to ratify the current fee structure for HMOs, which we're obliged to review from time to time, and it was last reviewed in 2017. But the point is, many landlords say to us, if they're a compliant landlord that fills in an application form completely accurately and doesn't present us with any challenges at all, why do they have to pay such a high fee? And regrettably for those businesses, which are the compliant ones, it is so that we can afford to allocate some office time to chase the unlicensed HMOs, which was the point Nick was making about the Hemmings judgment on the European levy, that you are allowed to charge one fee for administering and processing an application, but also a second fee for the enforcement and management of the scheme generally. But that element of the task does potentially take quite a lot of officer time to actually hunt out unlicensed HMOs. I mean, it's not quite as difficult as it sounds, because the simplest way to find unlicensed HMOs is to ask the public or ask councillors, because they will often know. So we've got stacks of them on our schedule for inspection and investigation already. So I'm not wanting to suggest that we have to send officers out to walk the streets and knock on doors, because we've got plenty of reports coming in. But of course they will take investigation. And with housing properties, of course, if you knock on the door and nobody answers, which is quite common, you don't get very far. So the investigation then has to go beyond that in terms of scrutinising records held by the council, talking to neighbours, trying to gather information from disgruntled tenants, that kind of thing. Because just walking up and knocking on the door doesn't usually go anywhere. I hope that answers it.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
There we go. As part of our return to the committee system, Richmond has set up a performance and policy review board. It's quite a mouthful. And the first investigation it's decided to involve itself in is on licensing, because one councillor suggested it. So I just wanted to ask Nick his preliminary thoughts on this. The issue appears to be a long-standing issue about why can't the way we deal with licensing be more like planning in terms of the breadth of consultation, the publicity, the information online. When this subject last arose about 10 years ago, we were told that the council would be subject to legal challenge if we went beyond what the law required in terms of publicity and so on. It's the same issue that people want investigated again, but I don't know if it's something to preliminary comment.
I think the same issue will still arise. The statutory consultation period is set by the Licensing Act. Who we consult is set by the Licensing Act. However, the single case management system that we want to put in place has, let's say, better bells and whistles. So in relation to the way that you see the new applications under the Licensing Act now, you see very scant details. You see effectively a spreadsheet which just shows when the applications come in. I know in reference to Richmond, the Richmond Society then contact us and ask us to provide them with a redacted copy of that application. Now, we're quite content to do that, but clearly that is a burden on our time, and it's also a burden on Mr. Willen's time to ask for that information in the first instance. So we will end up with something that is akin to the planning portal, so you will see more by way of information. Clearly we have to be careful in terms of data protection, but there is no harm if we have a system that contains that information in the correct format for us to release what we can release into the public domain.
Thank you very much. I've got one question, and you know, if you can answer, if it's confidential and when you can't, then that's fine. But reading through this, I just noticed that for Merton, they talking about the discretionary fees. That is, if their fees is based on the number of treatments at any one time, and for Richmond, it's based on the number of therapists. And then for Wandsworth, it's mostly risk-based. So I'm just wondering if you're trying to come up with one set of fees, is it a matter of trying to, would it be you trying to get everyone to go risk-based or numbers? Is that a question that we can answer at this time?
I would argue they're all risk-based to a degree. The larger the premises, potentially the greater the risk there is. So the fee structures take into account the risk, but also the amount of time it takes to undertake physical inspections, process the application, and so on and so forth. We will come up with something that, being regulatory professionals and environmental health officers, our real mantra is about protecting public health. So we will come up with something that does that in the first instance, but also is a rational fee structure that the general public and businesses can understand, and also generates a fair portion of businesses.
Thank you very much. The recommendation here was for us to note and comment, which we've done. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the last one, agenda item 6, for us to determine which, well, for us to actually agree. And the next meeting will be on February 11, 2020. Unless you want to make any other suggestion. Do we agree there?
Agreed.
Thank you. So that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much.